In Sparta, a child's first test came before he could even speak. The elders examined him, not for beauty, but for strength. A weak or sickly infant they believed would only suffer in the harsh life ahead. Only those judged fit to serve the state were allowed to be raised at all. Bathed in wine. Legend says Spartan mothers bathed their newborns in wine instead of water, a test some believed would reveal a weak constitution. True or exaggerated, the message was clear from day one. A Spartan's body belonged to Sparta, before it belonged to himself. No one comes running. When he fell as a toddler, no one rushed to lift him. His mother watched from a distance, arms folded, waiting. Comfort, she believed, made a boy soft, and softness had no place in Sparta. He learned to stand back up on his own, again and again, long before he understood why. Stories by the fire. At night, he listened to the men speak of battles fought generations ago, of shields that never broke, of soldiers who chose death over retreat. He didn't understand all of it yet, but something in those stories settled into him, quietly, like a seed waiting for the right season to grow. Taken at 7. At 7 years old, he was taken from his home. No more mother's warmth, no soft bed. Sparta itself would raise him now, alongside hundreds of other boys just like him, all beginning the same long road at exactly the same age. The herd. He was placed into a small troop of boys, led by an older teenager who had walked this same road years before. This herd became his new family, boys who would eat, train, and struggle beside him for the rest of his life. Rank was earned, never given. Marching barefoot. Shoes were considered an unnecessary comfort. The boys trained and marched barefoot over rocky, uneven ground, toughening the soles of their feet until pain became background noise. It was one small piece of a much larger lesson, that the body could be taught to want less. Hunger and discipline. Food was scarce on purpose. Hunger taught him to be resourceful. And if he was ever caught stealing, the shame of failure hurt far more than the punishment. What mattered wasn't whether he broke the rule. What mattered was whether he got caught. The cold nights. Each boy gathered his own bedding. Dried reeds pulled by hand from the riverbank, with no fire allowed to warm them. In winter, some added thistledown for a little extra warmth, believing it made the bed too soft otherwise. Comfort, even in sleep, had to be earned. Wrestling in the dust. Combat began not with weapons, but with bare hands. Boys wrestled each other in open dirt pits, learning balance, grip, and the will to keep fighting through exhaustion. Bruises were worn without complaint, proof that a lesson had been learned the hard way. The test at the altar. Once a year, boys stood before the altar of the goddess Artemis Orthia and endured a ritual test of pain without crying out. It sounds brutal to modern ears, and in many ways, it was. But to a Spartan, silence in the face of suffering was the clearest proof of self-mastery a boy could offer. Words like spears. Spartans were taught to speak as little as possible, and to make every word count. Long speeches were seen as a waste of breath. A sharp, clever reply, delivered in a single sentence, was worth more admiration than an hour of eloquent argument. Even conversation had discipline. The war dance music was not a break from training. It was training. Boys danced the Pyrrhic, a war dance performed in step with flutes and drums, mimicking the exact movements of battle. Rhythm became instinct. Years later, in the chaos of real combat, that same instinct would help hold the line. The Iron's shadow. As he grew older, an Iron, a young man barely out of the Agog himself, took him under his wing. This mentor taught him how to lead a squad of younger boys, and was held responsible for his mistakes. Leadership, he learned, meant carrying the weight of others into the wild. At around 18, some youths were sent alone into the countryside for the Crypteia, surviving by their own wits, avoiding capture, living off the land. It was one of the darker, more secretive traditions of Spartan life, and historians still debate exactly what it demanded of the young men who lived through it. Proving ground. Before he could call himself a citizen, he faced one final round of trials before the elders. Tests of endurance, discipline, and character built up over more than a decade. Not every boy passed. Those who did were finally, formally, considered Spartan men. Becoming the warrior. At 20, he became what Sparta had spent 13 years building him to be, armored in bronze, shield in hand, ready to stand in the line. Everything before this moment, every hardship, had been leading here. The bond. He did not fight for glory. He fought for the man beside him, a bond forged over 13 years of shared hunger, shared pain, and shared pride. It was a loyalty stronger than any oath, because it had been earned one hard day at a time. The Syssitia. Every citizen, from the wealthiest landowner to the poorest soldier, ate the same simple meal at the same communal table, including the infamous black broth. At the table, rank and wealth meant nothing. Sparta had built equality into its very stomach, a Spartan wedding. Even marriage carried its own strange customs. On his wedding night, tradition says the bride's hair was cut short, and she was dressed simply, almost like a young soldier herself. A quiet nod to the discipline that shaped every corner of Spartan life, even love. The muster. Word came that the army was needed. Across the city, men gathered their armor, checked their shields, and fell into step with the units they had trained beside for years. There was no panic in their movements, only quiet, practiced routine. With your shield, or on it. His mother's words echoed louder than any battle cry. Come back with your shield, or on it. It meant return victorious, or return dead and carried upon it. But never, ever, having dropped it to run. In Sparta, there was no third way home. In the phalanx, his shield never protected only himself. It protected the man beside him. Rows of overlapping shields formed a single moving wall, spears bristling forward in unison. To break formation was to betray a brother, and no Spartan wanted that shame on his name. The line holds. Vastly outnumbered in some of history's most famous battles, Spartan formations still refused to break, every man trusting the man beside him more than he feared the enemy in front of him. That trust, built over a lifetime, was the real weapon Sparta had perfected. What remains? Sparta is gone now, its buildings long since crumbled into dust. But the ideals it built into its people, discipline, brotherhood, and the refusal to break under pressure, still echo through history, thousands of years later. That, in the end, was the real legacy of a life lived as a Spartan. Want more like this? Hit that subscribe button and let's unfold together the next episode.